HOA Karen mocked my blind daughter. Doctors said she had 3 months left, until a poor boy found the truth. It started with the sound of laughter. Not the warm kind that heals, but the cruel kind that makes you wish the world were silent. My daughter, Sophie, stood in front of the HOA clubhouse, her white cane trembling in her hand. She couldn't see who was laughing, but she could feel it. She always could. Across the lawn stood Karen, president of the HOA, sipping her sparkling water like it was victory. "Maybe if your daughter looked where she was going," she said to her friends, "she wouldn't trip over things that aren't there." They laughed harder. Sophie froze, her lips parting. "Mom," she whispered, "why are they laughing at me?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Because they can't see what you can," I said softly. Karen smirked, stepping closer. "Oh, don't be dramatic. I'm just saying that maybe she doesn't belong in a neighborhood built for normal families." The word normal hit harder than any slap. But what Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sophie's blindness wasn't her biggest battle. Doctors had told us she had 3 months to live. A rare degenerative disease was shutting down her nervous system, and even hope seemed to have an expiration date. Then, just as the world dimmed around us, a voice from behind spoke up. "Hey," it said softly. "She doesn't need eyes to see what's real." It was a boy, barefoot, covered in paint and sawdust from his part-time job at the maintenance shed. His clothes were worn, but his gaze steady. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, great, another one from the cheap side of the tracks. But that cheap boy, that quiet, forgotten soul, would soon uncover something no doctor, no expert, no HOA leader ever dared to believe. Because what he found wasn't just the truth about Sophie's illness. It was the truth that would destroy Karen's entire kingdom of lies. Before the diagnosis, before the blindness, before Karen's poison turned neighbors into strangers, there was peace. We lived in Willow Creek, a quiet gated community where everything looked perfect. Freshly painted mailboxes, trimmed hedges, kids biking in neat little helmets. It was the kind of place that sold itself on the illusion of happiness. Inside our small beige house at the end of the cul-de-sac, we didn't have perfection. We had love. And that was enough. Sophie was 7 when she started to lose her sight. At first, it was small things, bumping into corners, missing a step. She'd laugh it off, saying, "The world just hides from me sometimes." But then came the headaches, the dizziness, the hospital visits that turned laughter into whispered prayers. Doctors called it optic neuropathy, a rare degenerative condition that slowly destroys the connection between the eyes and brain. "We'll do everything we can," one doctor said, "but eventually, she won't see anything at all." That day, something in me broke, but not Sophie. She learned the world through touch and sound, the way wind felt on her palms, the texture of bark, the rhythm of footsteps. She told me once, "Maybe I'm not blind, Mom. Maybe I just see with different parts of me." Her optimism became our survival. Every morning, she'd sit on the porch, holding her little Braille storybook while the neighborhood kids played. Most ignored her, not out of cruelty, just fear of difference. But it didn't bother her. She'd whisper, "They don't need to see me. I already see them." And then, of course, there was Karen. Karen lived 3 doors down. Sharp jaw, sharper tongue, always in heels, even on garbage day. She ran the HOA like a military operation. Every shrub, every mailbox, every smile had to fit her rules. To her, Sophie's white cane and medical van were eyesores, reminders of imperfection in her manicured paradise. The first complaint came in the mail: wheelchair ramp unapproved design. Then, medical transport obstructing driveway. And finally, community image at risk due to visible disability equipment. I remember holding the letter, trembling with disbelief. Claire, my wife, tore it up and said, "Let her choke on her own perfection." But Sophie just smiled sadly. Maybe she just doesn't understand what broken looks like. We tried to keep peace. We tried to stay invisible, but Karen hated anything she couldn't control. And my daughter's quiet courage reminded her of everything she'd never be. Still, our home, was our haven. We filled it with music, touch, and laughter that no HOA notice could silence. Sophie's world might have been fading, but her spirit painted it brighter every day. None of us knew that the same boy who swept leaves by the clubhouse, the one everyone ignored, would soon walk into our lives carrying the one thing stronger than any diagnosis: truth. It started small, the kind of cruelty polite people pretend not to notice. Karen never screamed. She didn't need to. Her words had a way of cutting softly, cleanly, like glass hidden in silk. The first time she mocked Sophie, it was at the community bake sale. Sophie was sitting quietly behind our table, her fingers gently tracing the outlines of the cookie trays. She couldn't see the shapes anymore, but she loved feeling the icing patterns she helped decorate that morning. Karen strutted over in her pastel blazer, fake smile shining brighter than her pearls. "Oh, how adorable," she said, voice syrupy sweet. "Your daughter's helping?" "How brave of her," I smiled tightly. "She's not helping. Has she baked half of these herself?" Karen blinked. "Really, without seeing? How inspirational." She turned to her friends, whispering just loud enough. "Poor thing probably doesn't even know they're burnt." They giggled behind manicured hands. Sophie tilted her head. "Mom, why are they laughing?" I forced a smile, throat burning. "Because they don't know what real courage looks like." Karen leaned down, her perfume thick and suffocating. "Sweetheart," she said to Sophie, "maybe next time you could listen to the cookies while they bake. I'm sure they'll tell you when they're ready." Even her friends went silent. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took Sophie's hand and led her away. She didn't cry. She just said softly, "She sounds sad when she laughs," but Karen didn't stop there. Later that week, she sent another letter, unapproved medical railing visible from the front walkway. "This violates community standards." I confronted her the next day while she was watering her roses. "Karen," I said, holding up the notice, "my daughter needs that railing." She looked up, unbothered. "We all have needs," she said, turning off her hose. "But rules are rules, and some of us still believe in appearances." "Appearances," I repeated. "She's blind, Karen." Karen shrugged, lips curling into a smirk. "Then she won't notice if it's gone, will she?" That was the moment I realized she didn't just dislike us. She resented us. Because no matter how much control she had, no matter how many rules she enforced, there was one thing she could never fake: compassion. From that day forward, she made it her mission to make Sophie feel like an outsider, whispered remarks at block parties. HOA reminders conveniently arriving every week. Once, she even told the landscaper not to mow near our porch. "Blind people don't need curb appeal," she'd said. But what she didn't know was that someone else had been watching. A quiet boy with tired eyes, who swept the clubhouse floors after every HOA meeting. He saw everything, heard everything, and soon he would uncover the one secret Karen had buried deep, a secret that connected her cruelty to Sophie's illness in a way none of us could have imagined. The day everything changed was supposed to be a celebration, the Willow Creek Summer Festival. It was Karen's masterpiece, banners, contests, and photo booths she bragged about for weeks. Every family was strongly encouraged to attend. I almost didn't take Sophie. Crowds overwhelmed her. Sound and scent painted chaos she couldn't control. But she begged. "Please, Mom, I want to hear the music. I want to feel normal again." So we went. The park buzzed with chatter and the smell of barbecue. Sophie clutched her white cane, counting steps like beats in a song. Her world was sound and texture now, the crunch of gravel, the warmth of sunlight, the laughter of other kids. At first, it was good. She smiled as a local band played nearby, tapping her foot to the rhythm. People noticed. Some smiled back kindly, others awkwardly looked away. Then Karen arrived. Clipboard in hand, high heels clicking against the pavement, sunglasses reflecting everything except humanity. "Well, if it isn't the Davis family," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. "Glad you could join us, though I must say it's quite brave of you to bring her out with all this activity." "She's fine," I said evenly. Karen smiled. "Of course. I just worry she might, bump into something. She turned to the crowd forming nearby. Everyone be careful. We don't want accidents. Laughter rippled through the air like poison. Sophie froze, her fingers tightening around her cane. Mom, she whispered, why are they laughing? Before I could answer, Karen continued, louder this time. You know, dear, she said directly to Sophie, there are special schools for children like you. Maybe you'd feel safer there. The air went still. Even the music faltered. Sophie's lips trembled. You mean I shouldn't be here? Karen shrugged. I'm just saying, not everyone belongs everywhere. It happened fast. Sophie took a step back, her foot catching on the edge of the curb. The cane slipped. She fell hard against the pavement. Gasps erupted. Karen rushed forward, feigning shock. Oh dear, I told you to be careful. I pushed through the crowd, heart pounding. Claire knelt beside Sophie, cradling her, her voice shaking. It's okay, baby. It's okay, but Sophie was crying. Not from pain, but humiliation. She said I don't belong, she whispered. Karen placed a hand on her hip. Well, she said, perhaps if her condition had been properly managed, this wouldn't have happened. The crowd fell silent. A few people muttered under their breath. But no one spoke up, except one voice. Stop talking. It was the poor boy, standing just behind the lemonade stand, his mop bucket at his feet. His name tag read Leo. Karen turned, frowning. Excuse me? He stepped forward, eyes cold. You talk like you know everything. But maybe you should check your facts before you laugh at people fighting for their lives. Karen scoffed. And what would a janitor know about any of that? Leo hesitated, his jaw tightening. More than you think. He picked up Sophie's cane, gently wiped the dust from it, and handed it to her. You're braver than everyone here combined, he said softly. Karen rolled her eyes. Touching. Now get back to cleaning, but Leo didn't move. He just stared at her, long, quiet, thoughtful, because in that moment, he recognized her voice. He'd heard it before. Not at the HOA meetings, but in the hospital records room where his mother used to work before she died. And that memory would soon lead him straight to the truth about Sophie's illness and the dark secret Karen had buried behind her perfect smile. The fall left more than bruises. It cracked something deeper, in Sophie, in me, in everyone who'd watched and said nothing. For days afterward, she wouldn't leave her room. She sat near the window with her back to the world, listening instead of seeing, tracing the rim of her cane as if memorizing its shape. Her once bright laughter vanished into whispers of guilt and confusion. Mom, she asked one night, was she right? Maybe I don't belong out there. My throat tightened. You belong anywhere light touches, sweetheart, I said. But she only turned away, the sunlight fading from her hair as the disease kept doing its quiet work. Her condition began worsening again. The specialists confirmed what we'd feared. The degeneration was accelerating. The medication had stopped helping. She was losing not just her sight now, but the strength in her hands, her legs. 3 months, the doctor said softly. Maybe less. The news spread quickly through Willow Creek. Sympathy cards arrived. Neighbors posted sad emojis on social media, but no one visited. They wanted to appear kind without being inconvenienced by it. Except for one person. Every evening after work, Leo would stop by our gate. He never knocked, never intruded. He'd just leave something small on the porch. A jar of honey, a paper crane, a music box with chipped paint. Things that didn't need sight to be loved. When I finally asked him why, he shrugged. My mom used to say broken things remember who cares enough to touch them. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, dirt on his shirt from repairing community sprinklers. But there was a new intensity in him, a kind of quiet obsession. I need to tell you something, he said one night. About Karen, about Sophie, I frowned. What about them? He hesitated, glancing toward the street. When I was helping clean the HOA office last year, I found files, private medical correspondence from the clinic. Karen's name was on them. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of correspondence? Billing statements, donation records, some under the table. He opened his worn notebook and slid out a folded paper, a hospital letterhead. Look, same doctor that diagnosed Sophie. But months earlier, Karen made a special contribution to the clinic. Something about chemical storage, disposal testing. My stomach turned. That can't mean I don't know yet, Leo said. But my mom used to work there. She once told me Karen's company was funding experimental cleaning solvents, highly toxic, being stored near the pediatric wing. The same month Sophie was admitted for her first headaches. I felt the air leave my lungs. You think? I couldn't finish. I know something's wrong, he said. And if those records still exist, I can prove it. But Karen wasn't blind to his movements. That same week, another HOA notice appeared on our door. Health and safety violation, unsanitary property. A thinly veiled threat. Then came the whispers that Leo was obsessed, that he was using a sick girl for attention. Neighbors avoided us again. The same people who'd once shared pies now crossed the street when I waved. Karen smiled every time she drove by, a predator behind the wheel of a spotless SUV. She thought she'd won again. But Leo wasn't finished. He began spending late nights in the old maintenance shed, piecing together something from scraps. His mother's notes, hospital invoices, and emails he'd managed to recover from an old flash drive. Each night he came back more certain. There's proof, he told me. Proof that her illness wasn't an accident. I stared at him, heart hammering. You mean Karen? He nodded grimly. Karen's company caused the leak that poisoned her, and the hospital covered it up. The truth was finally within reach, but so was danger. Because the moment Karen realized what he'd found, she'd do everything in her power to silence him. And us. The next few days felt like living inside a nightmare that refused to end. Sophie's condition spiraled faster than anyone expected. The headaches grew unbearable, her voice weaker, her body trembling under every breath. Each doctor visit brought the same rehearsed sympathy. We'll do what we can, which really meant prepare for goodbye. Claire barely slept. She spent every night at Sophie's bedside whispering lullabies into the dark. I tried to stay strong, but every time I saw the empty dinner chair across from us, I broke inside all over again. Leo visited less frequently now, not out of choice, but fear. He'd started receiving threats. Anonymous letters slipped under his door. Stop digging where you don't belong. HOA knows what you're doing. You'll end up just like your mother. He never told me who sent them, but we both knew. Karen was tightening her grip, terrified that her porcelain-perfect reputation was about to crack. One evening, as rain pounded against the windows, Leo appeared again. Soaked, breathless, eyes full of desperation. He slammed a folder onto the table. She did it, he said. Her company leaked solvents into the clinic basement. It contaminated the air vents. That's how Sophie got sick. My heart stopped. Are you sure? He nodded, flipping through pages of records, signatures, internal emails, all stamped with K. Holloway, CEO, Clean Pure Industries. It's all here. My mom tried to report it before she died. Karen buried the file. Claire covered her mouth. She poisoned our child. And hid it? Leo nodded. And she paid the hospital to label it as genetic. It was too much. The room spun around me. I stumbled to Sophie's door, watching her frail chest rise under the blanket. She has 3 months, I whispered, and Karen bought them from us. Claire collapsed into tears. Leo clenched his fists. We can expose her. I'll show the media, the board. But before he could finish, the sound of tires screeched outside. Headlights cut across the rain. We rushed to the window. A dark SUV idled at the curb. Karen. She sat behind the wheel, her phone glowing against her face. She looked straight at our house, calm, calculating, unafraid. Then the message came through on my phone. This ends now. You don't know who you're dealing with. That was the night everything broke. Our safety, our silence, our belief that justice would protect us. Because from that moment on, we weren't just fighting an illness. We were fighting a woman who would rather destroy lives than face the truth. That night, we made a decision. Quiet, simple, but unbreakable. We were done being victims. Leo spread his papers across our kitchen table, soaked from rain, edges torn but still readable. She used her company's cleaning solvent in the hospital vents, he explained. It was supposed to be tested first. But she rushed the contract to save money. Claire leaned over the documents, hands trembling. And the hospital covered it up because she donated to them. Leo nodded. Her money bought silence. My mom found traces of the compound in air filters. When she tried to report it, they fired her. 2 months later, she got sick too. The room went still. For a long time, the only sound was Sophie's faint breathing through the baby monitor. So, I said, my voice low, we expose her. Leo looked up. That's the plan. But we do it smart. He explained everything like he'd been planning it his whole life. His idea wasn't just to accuse Karen, it was to prove her lies in front of everyone who ever bowed to her. The upcoming HOA annual gala, her pride and joy, would be her undoing. She'd be surrounded by reporters, board members, and the same people she'd manipulated for years. All we needed was the right timing. And proof she couldn't bury. Leo had already backed up the files to an encrypted drive. But the real key was a video. A recorded phone call from the hospital's head engineer, admitting that Karen ordered them to dispose of the waste quietly. His voice was clear, his guilt undeniable. Claire whispered, "If we release this, she's finished." Leo shook his head. "No, if we release it ourselves, she'll spin it. She'll call it fake news. We need her to deny it publicly. And then we show the world." We spent the next 3 nights preparing, printing documents, organizing footage, planning our words. It wasn't just revenge, it was truth, sharpened to a blade. Sophie, weak but lucid, overheard us one night. "Are you going to stop her?" she whispered. Claire smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart." "We are." Sophie reached for her mother's face, tracing her tears. "Then make sure she hears it. Some people only understand truth when it's loud." Leo smiled faintly. "Then we'll make it echo." The plan was risky. Karen was powerful, ruthless, and unpredictable. But so was desperation, and ours had nowhere else to go. As we turned off the lights that night, Leo whispered, "Tomorrow, she'll see what real blindness looks like. The kind that comes from arrogance." And outside, under the hum of the streetlight, Karen's SUV passed by slowly, her shadow crawling across our walls like a warning. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know it was justice. The next morning, the world looked calm, deceptively calm. But inside our house, everything was in motion. Leo turned our living room into a war room. Papers covered the coffee table, diagrams on napkins. Hospital emails printed and pinned with red string like a detective board from a crime show. Claire sat nearby, whispering instructions to Sophie, who listened intently. Her pale hands folded in her lap. Though weak, her mind was sharper than ever. "I want to help," she said. "I can't see." "But I can still speak," Leo nodded. "You'll have the last word, Sophie. When we show them the truth, they'll hear it from you." The plan revolved around the HOA Gala, Karen's annual charity night hosted at the community hall. It was her stage, her fortress, and her downfall waiting to happen. She'd invited the local news to film the event, to restore her reputation after the scandal with Sophie's fall. It was perfect. Leo had one mission: get her to deny everything, on camera. He'd pretend to apologize, publicly clear the misunderstanding, while secretly recording her confession. Once she lied, the hospital call recording and the documents would be projected live for the crowd and the press. It was risky, one mistake, and she'd sue us into silence. The night before the event, Leo slipped into the HOA office under cover of darkness. Using a spare key he'd made during his maintenance shifts, he entered Karen's private files. What he found made his stomach twist. A folder titled Containment Payments. Dozens of checks, signed, processed, cleared, to the same hospital that diagnosed Sophie. But the memo line on each payment said only one thing: air control study, confidential. He took photos of everything, his hands shaking. As he turned to leave, he noticed something else, a photo on her desk. Karen with a little boy, maybe 8 years old, standing beside a hospital bed. The same hospital. The same doctor. Leo froze. She had a child there, he whispered. He flipped the frame. On the back, a faded hospital bracelet. Daniel Holloway, expired, 6/14. A revelation struck him like lightning. Karen had once lost a child in that same hospital from the same toxic exposure. Her cruelty wasn't just hatred. It was denial. She'd built her empire of control to bury her guilt. When Leo returned that night, his voice was low but trembling. "She's not just evil," he said. "She's broken." Claire looked at him, stunned. "So why hurt Sophie?" "Because Sophie survived what her son didn't," he whispered. "And she can't live with that." The next evening, under glittering lights and perfect tablecloths, Karen stood proudly at the podium, smiling for cameras, unaware that her entire kingdom was about to collapse. In the back of the room, Leo adjusted his hidden mic and glanced toward us. "When she speaks," he said, "we let the truth speak louder." And in that moment, even Sophie, frail, blind, dying, smiled faintly and whispered, "She thinks this night is hers. But it belongs to the truth." The Willow Creek Community Hall sparkled that night, chandeliers polished to blinding shine, champagne flutes clinking like crystal lies. Every inch of the room screamed perfection, just the way Karen liked it. She stood at the podium, radiating false grace, her smile wide and hollow under the lights. "Tonight," she declared to the crowd of board members, donors and reporters, "we celebrate unity, discipline, and the strength of our community. Despite recent misunderstandings." The audience clapped politely. They didn't know what was coming. In the back of the hall, Leo stood by the sound booth, disguised in his old janitor uniform. Beneath his jacket, the small recording device blinked green. He glanced at us, Claire clutching my arm, Sophie sitting beside her in her wheelchair, wrapped in a pale blue shawl. Her face was calm. Her eyes, though blind, seemed to see everything. When Karen's speech ended, Leo stepped forward, pretending to look nervous. "Excuse me, Miss Holloway?" he called out. All eyes turned. Karen's smile tightened. "Yes, can I help you?" He swallowed. "I just wanted to apologize for the rumors. I was wrong to accuse you." A murmur spread through the crowd. Karen's shoulders relaxed. "Well," she said, smoothing her blazer, "it takes courage to admit mistakes. I hope this puts an end to all the—" Leo raised his phone. "Actually, before we move on, can I ask you one thing?" "On record?" Karen blinked. "Of course." He held the microphone toward her. "Did your company ever use chemical solvents in Willow Creek Hospital ventilation systems?" Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then she laughed. "No, that's absurd. We're an eco-certified cleaning brand. You can check the public record." Leo nodded slowly. "Thank you." That's all I needed. He tapped his phone, and suddenly, the speakers crackled. From the sound booth, the hospital engineer's recorded voice filled the room. "Yes, Ms. Holloway ordered us to dump the leftover solvent through the ventilation system. Said it was cheaper than disposal. We told her it could harm patients. She said, 'No one will ever know.'" Gasps tore through the hall. Cameras turned. Karen froze, color draining from her face. "Turn that off!" she shouted. "That's fake!" But Leo wasn't done. He gestured to the projector screen, and there it was, the payment records, the hospital emails, her signature. One after another, her lies flashed across the walls like ghosts of guilt. Then came the final blow. Sophie's voice. Pre-recorded from home. Trembling but strong. "You said I didn't belong, Miss Karen. But maybe this world didn't belong to your lies." The crowd erupted. Reporters surged forward. Karen stumbled back from the podium, shaking her head. "You can't do this to me." "I built this place." "No," Leo said softly. "You poisoned it." Police arrived minutes later, led by county investigators already tipped off. Cameras flashed. Neighbors stared, and as Karen was led away, Sophie whispered to her mother, "I can hear her crying." Claire smiled faintly. "That's not crying, sweetheart. That's the sound of truth finally speaking." For the first time in Willow Creek's history, the HOA hall wasn't echoing with Karen's orders. It was filled with truth. The once flawless woman who'd ruled every lawn, every mailbox, every soul, now stood in handcuffs beneath the same chandelier she'd polished to perfection. Reporters flooded the lobby. Camera flashes painted her face white with panic. "Ms. Holloway," one journalist shouted, "is it true your company's chemicals caused the contamination at Willow Creek Hospital? Did you falsify documents?" Karen's lips trembled. Sophie turned her face toward her voice. "I can't see, Mom, but I can feel everything, and it's beautiful." That night, as storm clouds rolled across the sky, the hospital lights flickered. Sophie's monitors beeped slower, softer. Then, silence. We thought we'd lost her. The doctors rushed in, shouting orders, pushing us back. My knees hit the floor. Claire screamed, and then something impossible happened. The heart monitor beeped once, then again, then steadier. Her pulse came back stronger than before. Color returned to her cheeks. The lead doctor stared at the screen, whispering, "Her neurons are firing again. Her body's stabilizing." It made no medical sense. But somehow, after all the pain, all the poison, Sophie's body fought back. Hours later, when she opened her eyes, her first words were a whisper. "Is it morning yet?" Claire sobbed and kissed her forehead. "It is now." 2 weeks later, Karen stood before a county judge. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, victims, neighbors. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a grieving mother who made mistakes, but the evidence was undeniable. The judge's voice was steady as stone. "You hid contamination that harmed children. You silenced truth with fear. You will spend 7 years in federal custody and pay restitution to every affected family." Karen didn't speak. She just looked at Sophie. Sitting quietly in the front row, cane beside her chair, eyes turned toward the sound of the gavel. For a moment, something flickered across Karen's face. Not anger, not defiance, but shame. Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry." Sophie tilted her head slightly and smiled. "I forgive you." The room went silent. Even the judge paused. And in that moment, forgiveness sounded louder than justice ever could. When we left the courthouse, the sun was setting, warm, golden light breaking through the clouds. Reporters swarmed, asking how it felt to see Karen finally fall. But Leo said it best. "It's not about seeing someone fall," he said. "It's about helping someone rise, even if that someone was us." Sophie squeezed his hand, smiling. "You found the truth, Leo." He shook his head. "No, you were the truth." That night back home, Sophie stood on the porch, the wind brushing through her hair. She lifted her face toward the fading sky. "Mom," she whispered, "it's strange. I can't see it, but I feel light everywhere." Claire smiled through tears. "That's what happens when darkness leaves. Because justice doesn't always come with sirens or judges. Sometimes it comes in the quiet. Breath of a girl who should have died, but didn't. A girl who proved that even in blindness, she could show an entire world what it means to see." In the weeks that followed, Willow Creek began to breathe again. The lawn still glistened after the sprinklers. The mailboxes still lined up in perfect symmetry. But the fear that once filled every driveway was gone. For the first time, perfection didn't matter. People mattered. The HOA board dissolved Karen's bylaws, replacing them with something new, the Willow Creek Kindness Charter. No more fines, no more silent judgment. Instead, the neighborhood pooled funds to help families with disabilities and illnesses. They even installed Braille plaques across the park walkways, each engraved with one word Sophie had chosen herself: believe. Sophie became a symbol of quiet strength. Reporters came from across the state to interview her, not because she'd survived, but because she'd forgiven. Her story reached schools, hospitals, even news outlets overseas. People wrote letters saying they saw the world differently because of her. She'd changed more lives with her blindness than most could with sight. Leo stayed close through it all. He turned his late mother's research into a scholarship project for environmental safety, naming it the Aurora Grant. For Sophie, the girl who brought light where there was none. The two of them spent afternoons in the community garden he helped rebuild, laughing under the same sun that once felt so cruel. One evening, Sophie asked him, "Do you ever think Karen hated me because I reminded her of her son?" Leo paused. "I think she hated herself for surviving what he didn't. You just showed her the part of her she'd buried." Sophie smiled faintly. "Then maybe she's finally free." And she wasn't wrong. Karen was released from custody early under a rehabilitation program. She began volunteering at a blind children's foundation 2 towns over. Occasionally, letters arrived, short, careful, sincere, signed only K. They always ended the same way. "Thank you for teaching me what sight really means." Claire kept every letter. "Forgiveness," she told me, "isn't letting someone off the hook. It's letting yourself heal." Months later, at a community gathering, Sophie stood before the same neighbors who once whispered behind our backs. She couldn't see their faces, but her words painted light into the room. "You don't need eyes to see beauty," she said. "You just need courage to face what's ugly, even when it's inside yourself." The crowd rose in applause. Tears glimmered in the same people who once looked away. And as Leo took her hand, I realized what we'd all been searching for wasn't justice or revenge. It was transformation. Willow Creek didn't just survive Karen's cruelty. It became the kind of place Sophie always dreamed it could be. Imperfect, real, and full of heart. A year passed. The air in Willow Creek carried a peace it had never known before. The fences were still white, the lawn still green, but the smiles were finally real. The old HOA hall was rebuilt and renamed the Sophie Davis Community Center, its walls lined with Braille quotes and children's art. Every spring, the neighborhood held a festival in Sophie's honor, not to show off wealth or status, but to celebrate resilience. Instead of Karen's sterile perfection parade, they called it the Day of Light. Sophie stood on stage that first year, her white cane beside her, Leo holding her hand. She couldn't see the hundreds of faces staring back at her, but she could feel them, their warmth, their applause, their gratitude. "A long time ago," she began, voice steady and soft, "I thought blindness meant darkness. But I learned the dark isn't empty. It's where truth glows the brightest. You just have to stop running from it." The crowd fell silent, tears glinting like glass. Even the wind seemed to pause to listen. Leo watched her with quiet pride. After Karen's sentencing, he'd been offered a grant to study biomedical engineering. But he stayed in town instead, teaching at the community center and working with kids who'd lost vision or hope. One afternoon, while Sophie practiced walking along the garden path, he whispered, "You changed everything, you know." She smiled. "No, we did. You showed me what truth sounds like." From the corner of the garden, a woman in a gray coat watched them. Older, smaller, humbled. It took me a moment to recognize her. Karen. She didn't approach. She just left a bouquet of blue forget-me-nots on the edge of the path, the same flowers Sophie used to describe when she could still see. There was a note attached. "For the girl who helped me see again." Sophie ran her fingers over the petals and smiled faintly. "She found her way back," she said, and maybe she had, because in the end, this story was never about villains or victims. It was about what happens when truth refuses to die. When a blind girl shows an entire world what vision really means. As the sun dipped behind the houses, golden light spilling across the garden, Sophie lifted her face toward the warmth and whispered, "I can't see the sun, but I can feel it." And in that moment, everyone around her understood. She didn't need sight to shine. She was the light.